It's time for some more Monster Mayhem. If you've done any wading in the pools of fantasy, whether it's through video games, through TV shows, movies, or RPGs, you know that sometimes monsters and creatures that start out very simple and very basic sometimes get a life of their own and turn into something far more complicated and much more rich. I feel like that pretty much describes the arc of the Orcs. So let's talk about orcs. So I have been making all of these scales, and I think orcs fall on a very specific scale, and I call that the scale from cute to brute. Is your orc more adorable? Is it more approachable? Is it something that is less of a monster and more of a humanoid that's just a different type of humanoid? Or are you really leaning heavily into the monstrous angle and really having them more on the brute side? So starting off with our head shapes and our proportions, depending on where your orc is going to fall on your cute to brute scale, the proportions are going to vary. So I always typically start, because it's a humanoid, orcs are very humanoid, I start with the human proportions and then I go from there. And so I think the key is understanding your T-zone. I've spoken about this in my faces art hacks, but the eyes and the nose, that little T-zone is really important because you can shift it upwards and you can shift it down and allow the different parts of the head to adjust accordingly by shifting upward, creating more of a shallow forehead and a larger jaw, and then reversing that and shifting it downward, having a large forehead and a more shallow jaw. This changes up your characterization and it gives them different qualities depending on how monstrous or how human you want to make them. I always find that if I raise my T-zone up and I get sort of a more shallow forehead and a large jaw, that really tends to fall more on the brute side in a very typical orc-like fashion. But then I can make sort of the more intelligent, less intimidating ones with a T-zone that's lower. Now, teeth and tusks are another thing that are really important when it comes to the cute to brute. Whenever I want to have something that's a little more approachable and cute, I'm going to file down those little tusks on the lower jaw quite a bit more, and I'm going to make the teeth just a tad bit more uniform, because then by making it more human and more what we can see as relatable, it becomes less intimidating. Whereas I'm going to go completely on the other end of the spectrum, large tusks, I'm going to have jagged asymmetrical teeth, and then throw in a little bit of drool and everything there to kind of really amp up that monster animalism that can come out of the orcs, especially if you've got one that is a tank or is a villain and actually needs to sort of embody that more feral side. Something that I have found is that orcs have a very specific aesthetic, and while it doesn't necessarily have a descriptor, I call it the iron and hide aesthetic. And so the iron and hide aesthetic is very key to what they look like and informing all of their characteristics, all of their garments, all of their accessories. And the three descriptors that I like to use are heavy, as in it weighs a lot, obviously, and it affects their posture. Chunky, it is very bulky and it's not necessarily streamlined to their body, or it's piece fit together as like they were scavenged. And then natural and dull. Nothing is super shiny, nothing is overtly chromed out unless it is something that was pilfered, stolen, what have you, picked up off of an enemy, used as a trophy, something along those lines. But the general usage of those things, anything that would be in use like normal armor, something as a garment or a weapon, all of that is going to be much more dulled, and you're going to have a lot more leather, a lot more pelts, a lot more hides. However, when we get to piercings, this is something that I like to differentiate, because this is the only thing I like to keep shiny on orcs, because I believe that this is something that's for them more of like a status. You know, it's something that they're going to keep as shiny. It's decorative. It's really the only thing that they're using as something that is really decorative. So I usually like to make sure that the piercings are the one thing that really stands out as an accessory that looks like something that is not necessarily useful as a tool or as something that's pragmatic like armor or a weapon, but strictly something that is for dress, that is for decoration. And I think having that distinction really helps to kind of show where their value lies, but also gives a lot of characterization. Mixing and matching all of these elements are the things that are really going to help your orc stand out to become something that is an individual, something that you created, and giving a story to a character that otherwise could be fairly dull, fairly stock. And we don't want that. We want some narrative excellence, and we want substance behind the characters and the creatures that we create. So thanks for watching my video on orcs. Check out my school if you want some downloadable art hack guides and to join our community over there. And with that, go draw some orcs. Thanks, everybody.